Welcome to How We Grow, an essential playbook to grow and scale your vacation rental business with advice and insights from the best in the biz, with your host, Lynell Gordon. Welcome to the Vacation Rental Show. I'm Lynell Gordon, your host, and today I have a really special guest. We're thrilled to have Ashley Ching. She's the founder and the CEO of Inhaven. That's a platform designed to help property managers to elevate their operations and their guest experiences, and a lot more than that. But Ashley has been doing some really cool work outside of her CEO work. Let me just say, Ashley brings together a lot of the women entrepreneurs in our industry, and we all get together and we chat. We have a really good time. If you are an entrepreneur in our industry and you are not invited, reach out to Ashley. She'll invite you. We do the coolest kind of lunch and learn kind of things. That's what I call it. I know it's probably called something else, but Ashley heads that up. And I always learn something. It's always fun to go to. And then when we get together in person at any conference, we always get together and have a good time. Like, you are my social leader. Can I just tell you that?
It's been so fun.
Thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate you coming.
Thanks, Lynell. Yeah, it's just so fun bringing together female leaders across the industry. It's a great group. When we learn so much from each other.
So tell me about Inhaven, and then let's talk about what else you're doing, because it's cool stuff you're doing.
Yeah. So at Inhaven, we really help professional property managers set their standards for their vacation rentals. And what does that mean? It's creating a great sleep experience, a bathing experience, and an eating experience. We focus on standards for the bed, bath, and kitchen, the things that can be repeated across your portfolio of homes. You don't want to have different sheets in different homes or different coffee makers. You want to really set your standards so that your guest experience is similar as the guests travel from one home to the next. So we help them set those standards, maintain the standards through an inventory management tool. And this year, we're launching a distribution site for them to promote their standards as well to guests that are looking for more trust and transparency in their stays.
You do a great job of that. I love your work. Now, tell me what you're doing outside of that, because you're a busy lady.
Yeah. So a lot of people were following along with the Vacasa sale to the Casa Go consortium earlier this year. And we were sort of reporting on that weekly, just giving updates as they came in on the sale. It was an incredible story, the Vacasa story. And the sale really marked a bookend to this incredible rise and this very hard fall. And so as we were studying the Vacasa sale, at the same time, the largest professional property manager in the hotel space, Aimbridge, who manages about 1,500 properties, 3 weeks after Vacasa announced its sale or proposed sale to the Casa Consortium, Aimbridge announced its out-of-court bankruptcy restructuring. And it was just incredible. And as we look back on the history of Aimbridge and Vacasa, they really followed 5 key distinct time periods of their growth, from organic growth to M&A to a lot of their churn, and then eventually to their sales or their distressed financial states. And it was just amazing. These timelines really lined up, ironically, very close together as they went through these stages. And so then we were thinking, is this just a fluke? Is this just a coincidence that these two companies had these very similar stories? And then we started to go back even past that to the Resort Quest days and Interstate days. And we saw a very similar rise and fall of these property management companies. And so we started to ask the question, what causes this? Why can't national property management scale? And what is the success to national management? And that's when we really uncovered, through extensive interviews with executives across the vacation rental, hotel, and restaurant industries, because we were looking at all the service industries. We spoke to people on the national side and the local side, and we uncovered these 5 key principles to successful property management. And so that's where we have just recently launched a case study around this.
I found it fascinating. As you know, I was in there.
Yes.
When you presented, and I just couldn't stop with the questions and the interesting things for it, because I found it fascinating. Tell me a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about your findings.
Yeah. So there were really 5 key pillars, and happy to kind of go into each one of them and discuss them together. But the 5 key findings to successful hospitality management were: 1, you have to really have a curated portfolio that minimizes the number of bad apples. The second key finding was you really need to look at similar demand drivers amongst properties. When demand drivers become too complex and different across your properties, things start to fail. The third was the more successful property management companies limited the number of owners that they were dealing with. The fourth is that local-oriented operations are really key to success, not the centralized. And then the fifth was really you need to have your local employees feel empowered. So really this theme of empowered local hospitality professionals are critical to success.
So the first one you're talking about is you limit the number of bad apples. And what that basically means is we used to have what was called a Dogs of the Dow report for our property managers when we were doing back-end operation and reporting for that at LSI. We used to do websites, and as a part of that on the back end, there was all kinds of administrative tools. And one of those was your least performing properties. And among that, you could weight it based on mean people, mean owners, your time sucks, and that type of thing. So is that what you're talking about when you say add bad apples?
Yeah. So we heard this principle sort of over and over again that 4 out of your 5 properties must be drive-by and wave properties, right? You're able to stop into the properties, quickly see that they've got very smooth operations, they're well maintained, they're delivering profitability, and those are what we call the drive-by and wave properties. And so one of the 5 obviously are problem properties and they have issues that need to be addressed. It's when that ratio goes from 1 to 5 to 2 to 5, where now you start, just as you mentioned, sucking resources from your good properties to your bad properties. And that's really becomes toxic to the overall organization as more and more resources are going into solving for these bad properties. So you're always going to have your bottom 10%, your bottom 20%, because naturally as a company, you're improving all the time and your properties are only getting better. But it's when that ratio becomes more than 1 to 5 properties that you've got a problem.
So I want to challenge that a little bit. I want everybody who's listening, you guys, is it true that you can have 20% of your properties that take most of your time? I think it depends on the scale of your operations. Think about this. If it's 1 out of 5 and you have 10 properties, right? So that's only 2 properties that you're dealing with. But if it's 200 properties, that's a large percentage that needs your constant attention. I'd say that's a large number. So I would ask people, you guys who are doing property management, I think 20% is large. I could be completely wrong. Been wrong many times in my life. Don't mind that. But it sounds like a lot. Same thing if you think about it in business. Say you have 50 clients, and out of those 50 clients, 20% of them are giving you a hard time. That's a lot to deal with customer service, depending on what you're doing. Okay, so let me put it this way. How many clients do you have, Ashley, on average, that you work with?
About 350.
How many of those are problems?
Very few.
Less than 20%.
Yeah, definitely less than 20%. But I would say, though, and this goes to another section of the principles, but as you take on more properties, you grow your team, right? So at the end of the day, your team and the properties that they're managing, really 4 out of 5 should be drive-by and wave properties. And so there's a whole thing around really going into the next section, which is finding properties with similar demand drivers, right, is really crucial because once you start to add properties with different demand drivers, instead of getting economies of scale as you add to your portfolio, you get diseconomies of scale. And I think in service, a lot of the service industry actually, as you expand, there's a lot of diseconomies of scale because in service industries, labor is your number one costs, right? You need more people. I think about an example, I'll go into preschools, right? So you start a preschool and you've got a preschool of 10 children and you have 1 teacher per 10 child. So there's a 1 to 10 ratio. Now you expand your preschool to have 20 children. Well, you want to maintain that teacher to preschooler ratio. And so now you have 2 teachers. And as you expand to maybe 50 children, now you have 5 teachers. You also have to add administration, like an HR person, right? So you just continue to expand. And so I think in terms of as you take on more properties, there's obviously more people as you want to provide similar service levels. So we really say, whether it be 20% or 10%, the overall goal is to minimize the number of bad apples in your portfolio.
100%. I'm thinking about how difficult it is to manage difficult customers. And I know that difficult homeowners can be even worse. But anyway, it has to minimize that for certain.
Yeah. And we talk about this a little bit. And I think I went over this in the case study with you, Lynell, was one example of a scaled property manager that has been very successful is Panda Express. They're in the restaurant industry, fast food.
Absolutely.
And so they have a very curated portfolio. When they go into a mall, the whole executive team goes and they research these locations and they say, I want that one location in the food court next to the entrance of the food court, the high traffic location. And I will be willing to pay a premium, 20%, because they've done all their analysis to show that standalone location can be profitable. But if they don't get that specific location, they walk. And this is the same rule of thumb that I did when I was at Tiffany and Company. I was there for 13 years and I walked malls all over the world. And if we didn't get that one location, we walked because each location had to be profitable on its own. And so that's where you can be successful because you're trying to, as you walk these locations and you're doing the profitability analysis, you're doing the work to say, I want to minimize the number of bad apples. On the flip side, Aimbridge, which is the largest property manager on the hotel side, acquired a ton of different property management companies. And some of those hotels that they managed were good, and then some of them were bad. And it's when those bad became more than 20% of their portfolio, it became 30, 40%, that it became very distracting to management. They were flying all over the country trying to work on these hotels to make them better. It just became toxic to the organization, and that's where they really started to fail.
So let's go to number 2, because I think we get number 1. And I think that a lot of property managers already have a process in place. My favorite, and I probably said this a dozen times, I'm going to say it again, shout out to Tim Cafferty. My favorite was the way Tim Cafferty handled these bad apples. Now, I'm not talking about ones that weren't revenue-based. If it's revenue-based, I'm sure that's handled higher up. But I'm talking about difficult homeowners. They were allowed to fire. He had a certain number that they could fire. And it was the people that actually dealt with the homeowners that were difficult that got to choose who got fired each year. And I loved that. Get me some big heart there for Tim and the way he manages his team. I love him. Okay, so number 2, go into number 2 for me.
So the number 2 principle is you must have a portfolio of properties with similar demand drivers to be successful. So let's look at a company like Chick-fil-A, which is another example of a scaled national property manager who's been successful. At Chick-fil-A, they really make sure that each location that they're choosing across the US, so they're national, but they're picking very similar locations. They're right off the highway. It's people looking for a quick meal. Their product offering is very similar, right? They just offer the same menu across the country. And so because they have the similar customer and they have a similar menu, it's really easy to scale because those demand drivers are the same. On the flip side, if we look at a company called Evolution Hospitality, they have about 30 properties in the LA, San Diego area. They were looking to expand to Palm Springs. Palm Springs is only 2.5 hours away. However, in Palm Springs, it's 115 degrees in July and there are sandstorms. And that management company from the San Diego, LA area had no idea how to drive consumers to Palm Springs, just 2.5 hours away in the middle of the summer. And so they ended up having to hire more people, and they really saw diseconomies of scale there, right? They had a higher team to manage Palm Springs business. So even something that's just 2.5 hours away, I was talking to Beverly Sorrell, who runs Best Nest Properties, and Hilton Head has a fantastic business there and was looking to open up potentially a business 10 miles away. And she was like, Ashley, I don't even know how I would do it. I don't know the people there. I don't know who to hire. There's complexities with even having a business just an hour or so from you. So when I think about who has been successful on a national level, it's businesses that really are targeting the same customer and have the same menu of options across each of the locations that have been successful.
Targeting the same customer. And what was the second thing you said?
Like the same menu of options. So for example, in Chick-fil-A, it's fast food that they're serving. When you think about the vacation rental industry, are you serving 1-bedroom condos to mansion? Right. You can think about just all these different, or you have economy level stays and then luxury.
So again, I'm going to completely challenge you on this. And I'm going to go to number 5 and say that your number 2 has more to do with number 5 than it does number 2. Let me explain my thought here. Say you have a property management company that only has oceanfront vacation rentals, large homes. Their clientele, their customer, is not the same customer as, say, in Alabama, on the coast where you have all these high rises that have 1-bedroom condos. Total different menu of options because you're going to offer people on the ocean front to stay with a private chef or things like that. Whereas that person that's coming to that 1-bedroom condo, they're a different customer. They're probably a different demographic as far as revenue goes, as far as how much they can afford to spend. So these are totally different demand drivers. Do you agree with that?
100%.
Now you look at your number 5, which says local. Understand local. You've got to what's the problem with one person owning both of those, as long as they have local people on the ground that understand them both, and even coming together and creating a company that has both of those types of products in it as long as they understand, number 5 that you've got, as long as they keep it local and they understand their customer, why can't they do those too?
You can absolutely do that. You just will not get economies of scale out of doing that because your luxury oceanfront properties require concierge services. The guest has much higher expectations than that of the condos, maybe in the Gulf Shores that you recommend. And so you have to have different team members, or you have to hire. You're not going to get economies of scale when you buy those two businesses because they have different demand drivers and you need to cater to those different demand drivers. And so as long as you can staff them up but not expect economies of scale, there's going to be diseconomies of scale there.
Okay.
Built by property managers for property managers. Streamline is a powerful software that gives managers enterprise-level capabilities to drive more revenue and improve operational efficiency. Migrating to Streamline allows property managers to gain functionality while reducing the need for multiple vendors, improving flow by logging into a single system and reducing redundant technology costs. With Streamline, property managers achieve revenue lifts by leveraging our fully fledged communication center, reservations quoting system, revenue management tools, homeowner acquisition CRM, and powerful direct OTA connections. Streamline also has industry-leading trust accounting and report capabilities to give you clarity in an overall company performance. Learn more about Streamline Vacation Rental Software at streamlinevrs.com.
All right. So that's what you're talking about with economies of scale. You're saying the same person that handles the homeowners for the properties down in the condos is going to be different, and they're going to be expecting different things from this. Yeah, as long as you can have one person that can deal with it all.
Exactly. Well, your full to property ratio is going to be very different. In those luxury places, you can expect maybe one person managing 5 properties, like in Abode Luxury Rentals or Moving Mountains, whereas the other would be one person managing 15. And so your teams will shift, the amount of people that you need and the expertise will be different.
That's so interesting. I love that. Okay. Thanks for that explanation. Let's talk about number 3. What's the third one?
So we're talking about limited number of owners. And we've got 2 examples here. So limited number of owners being key to success in property management. So let's look at an example from the Pappas restaurant. The Pappas family owns about 90 restaurants in the Texas and Midwest areas of the country. And they have Pappasitos, Pappados. You may have eaten at some of these.
I have, yes. I live in Dallas, so yes.
Great family. Perfect. So they had an issue with about 15 of their restaurants in the Dallas area. They were getting reviews that the bathrooms were not up to their standard. And so these executives went and they visited all 15 locations over a weekend, and they confirmed that the reviews were correct. Their bathrooms were not up to standard. They made a decision that following Monday to replace the 15 general managers in Dallas and promote the assistant general managers, sending a message to the entire organization that if our bathrooms do not meet our standards, we will find other people to run these businesses. And so they were able to make those swift decisions about their business because it's the Pappas family that owns them. They can make these quick decisions and they can really fix their brand and their perception, quickly, very, very quickly. On the flip side, Aimbridge Hospitality, which is the largest hotel manager, they have over 300 owners. And all their owners, rightfully so, think that their hotel is the best asset out there and is the most important asset. And so all of these varying owners' demands really pull the team, the resources in all different directions. And you've got senior executives constantly traveling to sort of improve relations with all these owners. And that's when churn begins to really rise. And so the message we heard from these executives over and over again is to really be picky about the owners you're bringing on, just to your last podcast, and also to try to minimize it because there's only so much you can handle. So in the hotel space, when we look at successful hotel managers, really that number is about 300 hotels. We haven't seen anyone successful above 300, managing 300 hotels. That's where again, it kind of goes back to point number 1. As you start doing all these acquisitions and growing your hotel base like Aimbridge did and like the number 2 Highgate, they're bringing out a lot of bad apples. And again, that's distracting to the overall organization. So really it's 300 in the hotel space you max out. What is that number for the vacation rental space? We don't have that number.
Let's take a guess.
Yes, exactly. So how many owners can you manage really successfully?
Number 1, it's going to depend on some of the things you already spoke about. The similar demand drivers, which indirectly affects the number of employees that you have. So I guess it depends how many employees you have and how similar your owners are. So that's excellent. And what's our next one?
This one was the one you had the most questions on, Lynell. In Florida, the insight here is that you really need to prioritize local-oriented operations, not centralized. And so we spoke to many local hotel and vacation rental management companies that spoke about the key to their success was keeping corporate functions local because it has strategic value. So you have local revenue managers that know how to price and events and all that stuff. You have customized owner statements that really help differentiate you versus your competition. They also talked about centralizing insurance, IT, and accounting when it's only about 4 to 5% of your sales. You have to really think about, like, is it important to centralize those functions when there's such a small percentage of your overall cost? And really weigh the risks of savings versus degrading customer service. I was listening to a podcast with Steve Schwab on Vacasa, and they were saying centralizing customer service has been a huge disservice to Vacasa because people are calling, and these customer service professionals are very professional. But you're calling someone in Portland or in the Philippines, and it takes forever to get responses. And so you just feel like as an owner, you're deprioritized. And I think about that when I worked at Tiffany & Company, another Tiffany & Company example. I went out and ran merchandising for Tiffany for Asia. We had a local office in Hong Kong. And so there's this constant, what do we localize for Tiffany in Asia versus what's centralized? And so much of our strategic value to the region was all of our local operations and our local marketing tactics. And really, it's just what can be centralized versus what do you keep local that has strategic value.
What do you think can be centralized? What do you think, Ashley?
I mean, I think some of the IT systems can be centralized. Once it starts to take away from that local strategic value, then you really have to question it. So yes, you can centralize IT, but you need to make sure that you're still giving the local reports that you need. So I think it's just making sure that you're centralizing smartly and not losing competitive advantages.
Let me suggest this. This is an idea. I think you can centralize the accounting, the HR, and the IT. But I don't think you have to centralize the property management system. There are so many APIs now that will go out and suck data and bring it in that say you have that local person down in Mexico that's using whatever they're using and they have their reporting. Not only do they have their reporting to run their company, they have their reporting for their owners. And you have a company, say in Hawaii, they have a different property management system, but say you own both of those. There's no reason that you couldn't use a centralized service to grab the data out of both of those PMSs and pull your reporting that you need on a higher level and still allow them to operate locally independently in the way they did. I think one of the largest mistakes that I've seen in centralizing services, now this isn't for property management, this is in business, is to centralize the accounting. I understand why it's important. I get that, but it causes so many issues with the companies when it's centralized. So
yeah, I mean, we have examples of Ambridge Hotel or Ambridge Hospitality Management. They tried to centralize accounting and tax, and they weren't abreast on all the local jurisdiction tax payments. They were behind on taxes, and then that causes a lot of extra fees and stuff. So you have to be very strategic when you do centralize and make sure you're doing it right. I think from a property management perspective, there is such a struggle when you switch from one PMS to the next. So to your point earlier, that causes so much owner churn. And we heard about that on the hotel side. We heard about that on the vacation rental side. This centralizing PMS software can cause a lot of churn.
Yeah, and it's also one of the hardest things to do. Everybody knows how painful it is. But I think if you had Sue Jones hanging on and working with you, you could centralize HR. I'm just saying. I really think so.
I love her.
So I do too. I do too.
And then the fifth point that we talked about was really making sure that the local hospitality professionals feel empowered. We heard over and over again in our interviews that when you go to hire someone in hospitality, you're looking for that hospitality gene, that special person that can be yelled at by owners and guests hour after hour and show up with a smile on their face and wanting to just make things better, right? They just have that hospitality gene, and they need to feel fully empowered to deliver on great guest experiences and great owner experiences. And so when we look at Ambridge as an example, the hotel management company, when they would acquire these local professional property management companies, that local company no longer focused on the guest or the owner, but getting corporate approval for everything. And they would go to Ambridge and say, we do pre-arrival inspections. And Ambridge would say, well, that's really not the Ambridge way. And it just felt so disempowering. And so what happened at Ambridge and other these national companies is we saw a massive brain drain where the best employees will go and work for another professional hospitality management company. They don't need to stay with Aimbridge. They'll go and work where they do feel empowered to deliver on great experiences because that's part of their genes, right? They need that. And then you're left with the worst employees. And so really making sure that your local teams feel empowered is critical to the success.
You know what? I loved your presentation. It was one of my favorite presentations ever. And your husband is so smart and he's so kind. You're a great partnership. I think there's a lot to learn from what you've said. I think that even as a property manager, learning how to grow and scale your own business, I think there are lessons to be learned here as well, especially for companies in the Outer Banks that have 6 different offices because they're in different areas. They've learned this the hard way. They know this. We don't have to teach that to them. And I think that when you decide you want to become a really big property manager by acquiring other companies, you might reach out to some of those companies that have done this for a long time, because I can tell you that the customer up at the end of Corolla in those large 20-bedroom houses is a different customer than the ones that are down in Waves. I think the Outer Banks is a great study of a lot in property management. And I think we don't take enough advantage of the specialties we have there in the property manager. They're some of the smartest in the business, in my opinion. Same thing over in Hawaii. You have the same kind of thing on the islands. Brilliant people over there managing property management. Tell me your favorite property management story of someone that you've worked with, or just your favorite property management story.
I think this goes to the local aspect. And I would say it's with Rob and Rachel at Abode Luxury Rentals. I think they run just an incredible team there. And one of my favorite stories was, and just how important it is to have a local team. A guest called, there was an issue with the home, and the gentleman that picked up the phone at Abode literally was like, I'm 2 minutes away. Instead of telling me your issue, I'm going to be at your door in 2 minutes. And he literally was there faster than they could explain the issue over the phone. And I think that just speaks to the wow service that professional property managers can provide, and just the importance of being local and have a local team there to quickly address guest issues. So that's one of my favorite stories about the Abode team.
I love that story. I love that team. So very kind. The really cool thing about property management is that the people that are listening here, the property managers and the people that are in this industry, guys, you're some of the nicest people in the industry. I love you all. You're just so sweet. You make people's lives better. That's what you do. You make their lives better by giving them vacations that leave memories and experiences that are lifelong. You make differences in people's lives. And I love that about our industry and about the people that we work with. Ashley, is there anything else you want to talk about before we go? If you can talk about Inhaven, you can talk about anything you want to.
Yeah. Inhaven is obviously my number one passion. So anyone that needs help really setting standards for properties, or already have standards but want to just make them more profitable, turn supplies into profit centers, we would love to chat with you. And then there's going to be more to come. We've got a phase 2 of this case study coming out in the fall. So we are excited to launch the next phase on really how we believe that you can scale at a national level, what can be done. So more to come there.
Well, Steve Schwab will certainly be a case study that we keep in our hearts and minds. We love him. We wish him every continued success. And I'm so glad that he has an incredible team there that he's working with. And I hope he's the biggest success story we've ever seen, Ashley.
Me too.
Thank you for coming on and talking with me. I love talking with you, and I really am grateful for all that you give back into the industry, Ashley. I think that people don't realize how much you give outside of just being a phenomenal vendor in the industry. Thank you for bringing women together in our industry. And guys, again, if you're an entrepreneur, if you'd like to be a part of the team, Ashley, how would they reach out to you?
Yeah, so they can just shoot me an email at ashley@inhaven.com. Would love to have more female founders.
Yeah, we have so much fun. We have so much fun doing that. All right. Well, thanks again. And I look forward to talking to you soon. See you at the next meeting.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thanks.
This episode of How We Grow was brought to you by Streamline. To find out more about how Streamline can help grow your vacation rental business, visit streamlinevrs.com. Make sure to search for How We Grow in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. On behalf of the team here at Inhabit, thanks for listening.